Hello, everybody. Welcome on the Lights on Data Show. Today, we're going to look at how to drive value from your data strategy. And we're going to do that with Nicolas. Welcome, Nicolas.
Hi, happy to be here and very happy to have that conversation with you today.
Well, my pleasure is mine. So, let me tell our guests here a little bit about yourself. So, you have more than 20 years of experience in enterprise software, data, and analytics, and that's impressive enough. But not only that, you had the opportunity to lead the development and to bring to market several innovative software and data platforms, across multiple industries like telecom and bank and finance, retail, and so forth and so on. And in that context, you've been really working globally as a strategic advisor to leading organizations on IT and data architecture to support ambitious business and digital transformation goals. But with always the same focus in mind, making sure the technology serves a business purpose and brings value. And nowadays, you're the founder and CEO of YOOI, which is a SaaS platform to help enterprises better manage and accelerate their data and analytics strategy. And of course, optimize the business value of their data and analytics investments. That's impressive. So I think a lot of people want us to delve into that topic and find out a little bit more. But I'm also curious, besides doing all of these things, what do you do in your free time? Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah, maybe it's a cliche, but I'm French. I'm based in France, and I'm kind of very much into food and wine. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really something I'm getting quite maybe obsessed sometimes with. For example, I'm a big fan of pastries. So I tried maybe not all of them in Paris, but a lot of them. So if you ever happen to step in Paris and need some tips for sweets. And so that will be don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm mostly cooking a lot over the weekend. We like that. And at some point, I think we can do some how to say parallels between cooking and data. You take raw material and you create some added value out of it. So
Absolutely. And
yeah,
you
that's
always need those clean materials, the clean ingredients,
then you need the ingredients and you need them
high
clean and so
quality.
on.
Do you have a favorite dessert?
That's tough. I'm not even sure what my favorite dessert is. Maybe let's say citrus pie. Oh yes,
Okay.
yeah, lemon pie.
Like
Yeah,
a
sorry,
lemon
lemon
pie.
pie. Lemon pie. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
because it's
My mouth is watering a little bit right now thinking about what that could taste like, for
oh,
sure.
lemon pie. Yeah, okay. So let's have a lemon pie sometimes.
Yeah, that will bring a lot of value in my day, for sure. But I think that's a great segue. What do you mean by value when we're talking about bringing that value out of that data strategy? What do you mean by value?
Yeah. So I mean, I usually use value in a kind of broad sense. So it's everything that serves the business strategy is some kind of value. So the way you define value can be very different from one organization to the next one because you really
Yeah.
need to start from what really matters to you and what brings value to the organization. So that's tied to what's your business strategy, and then what's the good levers to yeah improve it and then to create value. So usually I avoid to use the term, for example, monetization, because it has been not so well understood by many people as just a way to sell your data. And they say, oh, it's bad, I don't want to sell my data. And sometimes it's not welcome to sell your data.
Hmm.
So maybe to be a bit more specific, you can use value for a lot of different use cases, from launching new products to optimizing processes, reducing anomalies, having improving your environmental impact, and so on and so on. So one way to measure value is something that could be financial. You could try to translate that into financial gains or financial cost reductions
Hmm.
and efficiency gains. But sometimes you don't want to financialize everything. So you want to keep things that are like customer satisfaction or churn rate or employee happiness or your carbon footprint and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
so all of them can be value levers as long as they match your expectation. And maybe the other side of it is that when you look at value, you have those upsides, but you also have to take care about the costs and risks that are implied. So that's part of value, because you don't have upsides without the what comes with it. So to make sure that it is actually bringing what you want, you also need to track those costs and value.
Right.
And so, and all that is really important, because when we look at surveys, everyone's saying that data has a lot of value and can be valuable, and, and it can bring a lot of things to the enterprise. But at the end, like I think Gartner is saying, like 80% of data analytics investments actually fail to deliver any value. So that's kind of things that we uh, are kind of stuck with and struggling with.
And are you noticing a type of that value calculation that's more prevalent than the other, more frequently encountered, or maybe depends, varies on the industry?
Uh, I think it varies on maturity, because if you want to financialize everything, sometimes it's hard, or sometimes it's what you want to do at the beginning, but then you have a lot of let's say not biases, but limits with that,
Hmm.
because I think some people are struggling with the fact that you should attach an ROI to data analytics investment, because some of the things you do will be midterm or long term. So you need to find ways to have both, have both some financial impact, but also other things that are more representative of longer term ambitions. And those are harder to attach to financial value in the short term.
Got it. And Ravid, he is wondering, what's the best approach for an organization to be data driven? And that also makes me think, do you see a difference between data driven and value driven?
Yeah, so that's that's a good question and a tough one. So I mean, maybe I can start with data driven and value driven, is because um, there's been a lot of debates lately with some experts on LinkedIn, about whether data driven or value driven is the right way. So I think for non-experts, maybe it seems like people playing with words or being picky. But actually, at the end, I thought about it, and I think it makes sense, because it's all about what you want to convey. The thing is that what you want to do with data is to be able to take decisions, and you need to have insights for that. So there is this indirection, and even if at the foundation of what you want to do is with data,
Hmm.
that's not what's driving you. That's not what's deciding you. It's a lever to take decisions, and you need to account for more than that, which is your context, what you want to achieve, and so on and so on. So I think the value driven term and notion actually matters a lot, because it means you need to reverse the thinking and start from what you want to achieve, and then how data is actually going to help you. So it's more your fuel, or your oil, like sometimes it's used. And so I think at the end, you want to be driven by value, and you want to um, base that on data, because that's the way to be factual. So I think that's an important shift. And sometimes saying that I think the bad aspect of being data driven is that it goes down to saying that because you have technology, it will solve your problem, and
Hmm.
not and it's not necessarily the case. And we know that it fails a lot of time.
Just
And
want to add something from the
yeah,
audience. Daryl is mentioning that he thinks the phrase data driven is really putting the emphasis in the wrong place. So similar to what you're mentioning there, I would like to see a move towards analytic, insights enabled, or value driven, I guess, which is more descriptive and emphasizes where the value comes from.
yeah, I think it's we're basically saying the same thing. Is that you need to shift the emphasis to the decision you have to make and the value you're going to bring, and not on just on the data you have. And the tons of the potential things that it could mean and so on. So yeah, I think this shift from talking about enterprises being data driven to being I think Bill Schmerzo talked about something like data driven value creation or something like that. So it's a longer phrase, but um, at the end it conveys the thing a bit better. But we always use sometimes a data driven as a segue, but it could lead people to the wrong path.
Right. So, Nicola, then what's your advice for companies who want to become value driven?
Yeah, so I think it's I would say there are a lot of changes, but so back to the point today, what we've noticed that 2/3 of projects fail because not because of technology issues, even if there is a lot of focus on that and people talking about it, but because of organizational issues or project management issues. So like you fail to get access to right data, you fail to have the right quality, you don't pass the POC, and you don't industrialize, you don't have adoption from your users, or you forget about how much compliance and regulations are important for a specific use case, or even sometimes you fail to address the right problem. And so one of the main hurdles we've seen is that too many organizations are focusing on technology and building capabilities and not working on a prioritized set of use cases and having clear success criteria and so on. So I think the advice here is to shift the thinking, and that's the most important one for me, is really to go back to having a good clarity on what you want to achieve as a company. Again, how you deliver value, and then work to how data could enable that, or accelerate that, or reduce your risk, or optimize your cost together. And the second step is to make sure that you actually identify how you're going to measure those outcomes and those progresses, and then you can work from there. And obviously, then you need to work on technology, on processes, and so on. But the thing that you really need to go there. So there are maybe yes 3 things. So you need to start from that goal. That's the main. I mean, for me, that's the main message, and the one I'm almost repeating over and over again. It's you need to start with what you want to achieve. Then, because you'll need to do some kind of investments and transformation, you also need to be clear on your maturity, where you are today, what you're able to achieve. Because maturity is both what tools you have, what processes you have, and also then how ready are your people to cope with change. And so in that context, you also need to make sure you deliver things that are actionable. And I think that's also something which is really important, because when we talk about data strategy, sometimes it's something that looks very let's say theoretical for people, or like something for the boardroom and so on. But I believe the very contrary. It has to be something very pragmatic, and you want to execute on. So at the end, you need to make sure that as part of that change, because you have a clear goals and a clear, you know where you are, you need to select things that you're going to act upon and that people are going to use. So, most of the time I use something I learned a few years ago called the 3 U's, which is anything you deploy needs to be useful. So it has a goal for people. It has to be usable so that people actually can leverage that in their day to day, and it has to be used. So that's 3 simple, things to remember. I like that a lot, because even if it's obvious, I've seen so many cases where it's forgotten, to to make sure that you deliver something that has those 3 U's. And so yeah, so I think it's message is be pragmatic, but start from value, and walk your
Right.
path there, know where you are, and deliver iterative and tangible results, and build from there, basically.
There's a couple of comments here. They love the 3 U's, and there's a message from Twitter wondering, in terms of the data strategy, then do you have to revise it every so often? Is it once a year? How frequent do you need to go back and see how it needs to be redone?
Um, that's yeah, that's a good one. I think the data strategy itself is just a part of the business strategy. It's how data is going to enable your business strategy. So the main review is how frequent your business strategy is evolving, and it can be pretty frequent today because it's how you react also to what's happening. So
Right.
one thing we've been working on with Enterprise also, how you move from kind of yearly uh, strategic process or maybe quarterly reviews and so on to something that is much more continuous. How you get able to get new ideas or new needs as a continuous way. So you need kind of a high level strategic frame, but
Hmm.
then be able to cope with new ideas and prioritization and reprioritization much faster, because we know that in the current world unexpected stuff happen often. So I was discussing with the CTO last a few days ago, and she told me that in 2020 they just finished the strategic review the day of the lockdown. And then obviously all of that was dumped because none of that made sense at all just the day after. So that's and so they had to start with it, but they spent months is working on that kind of strategic plan. And so that kind of thing that make you think about how can I do something more continuously and still revise it. I'd say the more continuous it gets, the better it is. So,
What about Kate is wondering, do you have any advice if your data strategy does not align with the business strategy?
oh, that's a tough one. I'm not sure what it means actually, because um, if today you have that statement that it doesn't match, I think you really need that case where you really need to step down and start again and saying, okay, let's stop
Yeah.
everything we do and rebuild from there, and then assess from what you've already built and the plans you had, what you can maybe save from that and
Yeah.
repurpose or realign. But honestly, that's a case where the day you know that, just stop everything and rebuild something from the right angle, because nothing you're going to do is probably going to be more costing than bringing any value. So it's, or
Yeah.
maybe you bet on chance. But,
It's definitely a clear indicator that you need to start again and that most likely that data strategy will fail. And unfortunately, something that I've encountered a few times when the people involved in that data strategy, they don't have that connection to the business,
mm.
and they're mostly thinking on hardware data architecture piece, but now how it should support the business strategy and the business goals.
Yeah, that's it's almost a fallacy in IT, that so many people are focusing on building technical pieces. Let's build a data lake, or let's build the best data catalog, or let's build the best data governance program, and so on. But if it's not connected to value at the end, it's more creating a burden to the organization than any actual capability. So that's frustration for everyone, because then you have some people on the IT side frustrated because no one gets it, and no one's using it well, and on
Yeah.
the other side, people frustrated because they can't do anything because it's there's so many complexity and processes and stuff going on. So yeah, so you really need to reverse that and connect from value to unlock all those things.
Arshad is wondering if there's any effective way to quantify the value of the data strategy back to the business.
Yes, and again, sometimes it's not necessarily financially speaking, but at least if you know what brings value to the organization, and if you can connect that to what you do, then I think it's very easy to have those conversations to um, tell the story, to start with, tell the story about how it brings value. Because bringing value could be, you can do a survey with your employees and asking them how much time it gained, from their day to day, on how much easier, or and so on. Then sometimes you can also measure that with some more formal metrics, in terms of I actually reduced my churn, or actually improved my customer satisfaction with my NPS, or I
Hmm.
reduce some maintenance cost or some failure rate. So it really depends on your industry. But I think
Yeah.
you usually, and the thing is that it's mostly not done. Again, I was having a discussion with someone a few days ago. It was fun because it was a story that when they said, when we do budgeting, we spend a lot of time telling the value we expect from investments. But then once it's validated, no one cares anymore. No one's going to do the follow-up. No one's going to do the measurement. So we did the work before,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't do the work afterwards to actually check if what was, what the bet was based on actually unfolds afterwards, because the focus is only on the investment decision, and not on managing things all the time. So again, I think it can be both pragmatic, even if it looks a bit messy at the beginning. It's a way to move things put things in progress and in motion and so on.
Gauranga is wondering what comes first, the data strategy or establishing that data-driven program?
Um, yeah, I think
Maybe in
I was
parallel.
yeah, it's always it's a kind of chicken and egg question, because I think back to what I was saying, I think it's definitely strategy first. You need to have clear goals first,
Mm-hmm.
because then you can articulate the right program and the right features and the right technologies to support that. So obviously it's a circle, because with more capabilities you will have more possibilities, and you can review also your strategy based on again with your maturity growing, your capabilities growing, you can find new opportunities, or raise new things, and with culture growing you will also have new opportunities and so on. So it's a virtuous cycle. But if you need to start somewhere, it's always with what you want to achieve. And I think that's it's really the thing I can't repeat and hammer enough. That if you in case of doubt, start with value and start with what you want to achieve, because and I know that most of the time it's not what people fall down to. They will fall down with, oh, okay, I'm not sure what we want, so again, that story is like, let's build a data lake, because
Mm-hmm.
we'll figure it out afterwards, because everyone knows that we need a data lake. But then I've seen programs, I won't give the names, but I've seen companies who invested millions of euros or dollars on building a data lake over years, 5 years, and no use case in production at all afterwards. But when the only one that tried failed. So then they dumped all of it and started a new one. But that happened, I don't know how many times. So
And they blamed it on the technology, probably.
you can blame the technology, but actually the technology was not necessarily good, but it was not so bad. So that's not the problem. The problem was the whole approach, that you don't really know what you want to do with it. So what they built was Babylon. It was
Mm.
it was a huge thing, very complex. It could handle everything in theory and nothing in practice.
Yeah. And they didn't tie it back to the value to the business and the use cases and how should it be used.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, I think that's really a challenge that a lot of people are having, a lot of companies are having, and it's how to communicate that value back to the business leadership to gain that support. Do you have any recommendations or best practices, any best way to communicate that value to the business? Scott Taylor, the data whisperer, is asking.
Yes, that's a great question. Also, I think it's back to um, connecting. So basically, when you start, you need to articulate some value that you expect to get from your investor initiatives, and what you really need to do is to keep track of that all along the life cycle of projects.
Hmm.
So why should I do that initiative, and then am I still going to deliver that? So it's tracking the expected versus realized value, um, and so as long as you communicate back those results against what you wanted to achieve first, in terms of value levels, then it's going to make sense to the business leadership and so on, because those metrics or those levels make sense for them. So then you can tell. And again, it doesn't have to be numbers. It just could be a story around that. So
Mhm.
that's I know Scott Taylor loves stories, and but it can be stories in terms of how it's moving forward into the right direction and so on. And sometimes it could be numbers, but that focus on, okay, I'm going to for example, I'm going to do that initiative because it will increase my employee happiness. So the first thing is you can measure that by some surveys and so on. And then on the long term, you're going to start measuring that on the churn maybe you have it with your people, and and maybe on the very long term you'll see the tenure evolving also. So I'm just taking one example, but as long as you can tell that story, maybe you will need to use different metrics on the way, but it's just to reflect that back to what does that mean for your HR director, basically, if you do that initiative, and you can take the same. So because you will have articulated that value at the very beginning, when you first started to define the initiatives, then you need to articulate value back in the same frame at the end.
Absolutely. Sahar is mentioning a data strategy, data driven. Absolutely. So as part of the data strategy, as part of being data driven, value driven, you need to um, understand what are those data assets that a company has. When we're talking about data assets, though, what are you referring to?
Yeah. So I think data assets, again, we have a kind of broad view of data assets, because I think there was a kind of definition I liked. It's data asset is any data related item owned by an organization that, when exploited adequately and efficiently, can generate value for the organization. I liked it. It's not from me, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And when I say it's a broad sense, is that obviously the first kind of data assets are raw data or data sources. That's what most people talk to when they talk about data assets.
Hmm.
But I think what's important is to look at the full value chain. Everything that goes from that raw assets to generating insights or actionable things um, on the chain. And each of those item carries that potential or realized value, carries some specific risks and carries some specific costs. So you need to look at assets on the full chain to understand also where your risk and where you need to invest and so on. So to give a few examples, it could be machine learning models, it could be data pipelines, it could be dashboard and reports, it could be APIs or data streams and so on. So but having that view, end-to-end view, and of the different assets on the value chain and how you can reuse some of them in your different initiatives is really important, and to not just focus on data only, let's say, because data only is one piece, but the rest of it is like coming with their own characteristics, and all needs to be reused at some point, or leveraged and valued and so on. So I had an example some time ago with a CEO. He told me they had 20,000 dashboards in the organization.
Hmm.
So that's kind of an asset. But the bad thing about that is that most of them were never used. And even worse than that, he did a survey, and 80% of the new dashboard requests over 6 months were actually for dashboard that already existed and that were never used. So,
Wow.
so you really need to do something about that also. How to leverage that better, how to maybe sanitize that, and then capitalize.
Absolutely. Yeah, think of how many resources wasted for something that's never been used.
And
And
run costs, and
yeah, yeah. And again, unfortunately, we are seeing this often in companies for
Mm.
sure. But as you were describing all these different data assets and understanding all the different pieces, I feel it's difficult for a company to look at the full picture and see the full picture and see all the different projects and everything all in one place.
Um, yes, But actually, that's what we try to do with YOOI, maybe. So because what we see what we see today on the market, that there are a lot of pieces on that value chain, a lot of different kind of assets, and almost each of those pieces has a specialized tool. So you have tools for machine learning people, you have tools for data engineers with data pipelines, you have tools for data governance, you have tools for the DPO, injecting
Hmm.
DPL stuff and or CSPA and so on. You have analytics governance tools for dashboards and reports, and you have APIs governance. So everything is in silos, actually. So, and the same way, when you look at projects and portfolio, you have operational project management tools, but not necessarily a good view on how all of that articulates. So, what we're doing at YOOI is building a portfolio management platform for data analytics. And what does it mean? It means that it's a place where you can capture that's business strategy and all the all your levers or your strategic initiatives and how you want to measure that. Then in that frame, manage all your data analytics initiatives on the full life cycle. Maybe I'm going to back afterwards, and the connection between those initiatives and the assets and their characteristics. So then you have a view on how do assets contribute to initiatives and contribute indirectly to generating business value, but also then you can better assess how risks related to one given asset actually carry risks for your value, or how costs are aligned and so on.
Hmm.
So that's really important. For example, I've seen case where by not having a good view on how much costs are implied with a machine learning model and with the data pipelines, um, actually they were jeopardizing the value, the ROI of the outcome, because it was totally disproportionate in front of the expected business value of the initiative. So having that visibility helped a lot by coming back to the technical team saying, guys, you need to find ways to optimize that a lot, because otherwise just it doesn't work. I mean, we can't just spend hundreds of thousands of machine
Yeah.
learning costs per month for that.
That's a very good point because a lot of times I'm seeing companies, they're taking a look, let's say the marketing effort, but they're only taking into calculation how much money they're spending on advertising,
Mm.
but not necessarily on how long it takes and the resources involved to prepare the data for that marketing that's taking place.
Mm.
So again, creating the pipelines, pulling the data, filtering it, doing data cleanup, cleansing, all that stuff. So that would add up to even more, I think, to better calculate the ROI.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have that global view, because otherwise, at the end, you look at those people doing all that work, preparation work, as cost centers and not as how they generate value. So then we have people struggling to explain why they need more people, maybe,
Yeah.
and it's not seen as a valued trigger. So
Yeah.
that's
I want to put this comment up because Daryl asked a couple times, and I think you've addressed it, but just want to acknowledge his comment. And he's asking if you can speak to the difficulty that organizations have in mapping, tracking their initiatives and their dependencies and status.
Yeah, so I think that's the part I was coming to is so we have one dimension of portfolio management, which is from going to value initiatives and assets, and the other part is going through the full life cycle from um, ideation, how you collect ideas, how you qualify them, how you prioritize them, and how you build the ideal roadmap, then how you track development and have a coherent view across that value chain, which is very disparate today, and
Hmm.
then how you track value. And so back to Darius' question is that the difficulty today is that organizations have a lot of information in a lot of different tools, but it's everywhere. And even sometimes when it's distributed organizations, information is split across different departments who do the stuff different ways, and then have overlap. So I've seen cases where there are 3, 4, maybe more times the same initiative going on in different parts of the organization, knowingly or not. Um, and so again, here the role of portfolio management is to make sure that you animate the whole process from how you ideate things to how you select them, and ultimately when you decide to stop and to
Hmm.
or to continue to invest, and really make your investment decision, and try to align all those people on that. And that alignment requires a different view, slightly more high level, slightly more both, both more complete and maybe sometimes simpler, to articulate what's happening on all those technical pieces to the business value, and then all the different things happening. So I think the difficulty is basically that one, there is no, sometimes organizations try to do that manually, by consolidating things with Excel, but then it's very time consuming and people don't do it well because it's manual inputs and so on.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really a struggle. So again, that's really where we focus with YOOI, is trying to bridge that gap from between the business view, what's happening on the technical side, and helping making it more seamless and easier to manage, and also because it's connected to the different tools on the technical side. So
I was at a conference a few years ago, and I was talking to somebody from Microsoft, and they were saying that one of the big projects that they were involved in, they were basically putting together a list of all the different projects and programs and initiatives that they have within Microsoft. And Microsoft is huge, and it's not just in the US, it's international. They have
mm,
all these different offices, and it's because by accident they discovered that these two teams were working actually on two major projects that were very, very similar, maybe 90% overlap, and they were unaware of each other's efforts. And they were working on the same thing without knowing, in essence. So obviously, they would have made greater use of YOI.
yeah, that's there are a lot of stories like that. I remember when I was working as a consultant, we had an inquiry from 4 different countries of the same company for the same exact project within a month.
Hmm.
They were kind of all rushing to do that same initiative first.
Mhm.
So it was really tough to manage because we knew it was kind of all of them trying to not speak to each other. But yeah, that's kind of things you want to avoid from a global standpoint, probably.
Absolutely. Which is, I was very impressed when I heard about YOI, because I've never seen anything like that before, and it really seems to solve an issue that all companies have.
Yeah,
Um,
hopefully.
so you mentioned data governance as well, and when you're listing all these different pieces, and what is the place of data governance then in the holistic approach of to data?
um, I- yeah, data governance is key because it's a process, to make sure that you can use data in a safe way, and safe and efficient. I think that the two main things for me around data governance, because you build that inventory, you document things, you understand the technical lineage, you build up information quality, and so on and so on, and
Hmm.
then you make sure that you can enforce the policies. So, um, but I think there are two things here. The thing that um, most of the time, data governance is a bit like the data lake, as it's built from the bottom up, and
Hmm.
then it becomes something in itself, not necessarily serving the business strategy the right way. So it's I would say it becomes an administration, and no one likes administration so much because it's seen as a way to inhibit people doing business instead of enabling people to do business. Uh, and so I think that's so two ways. So once, I really think you need to have data governance, and to have a well done one, because it's part of. I said it from the very beginning. It's part of, if you want to deliver value, you need to manage your risks, and data governance is a lot about managing the risk tied to data. Um, and because you're going to connect the business strategy with the data governance, then you can make better decisions on the governance side, because you understand better in which context you're going to use things. You can better understand how you're going to streamline the processes, and so on and so on. So if you
Mhm.
really want to make, so you need data governance, but you need to build it in your data strategy, as a part of it, and really not build something that is again not aligned with where you are in terms of maturity or where you are in terms of risk. Because if you do, maybe for example, if you know that you're not very mature on your data governance processes, maybe the urgency is to start with low risk initiatives that don't require so much, and then you will you will learn moving forward. So it could be very pragmatic.
And as Dennis Kessler is mentioning here, any strategy is only meaningful if it relates to goals,
Mm.
because goals express what we aim to achieve, and strategy articulates a high level approach on how we propose to achieve those goals.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's way. I mean, it's. I think people have different understanding of strategy. Sometimes strategies is actually the definition of your goals, and at a high level how you want to achieve
Mm,
them, and then you have a more tactical things that is how you're going to deliver that. So, but I don't argue on the definition. It's perfect. I mean, it's good, but I'm not totally sure. Sometimes everyone has the same understanding of what it means, and indeed, we can consider the data strategy is a how with data to enable business goals at the end. But we know that the business strategy is sometimes something in itself. Yeah.
thanks, Nicola. So, talking about data governance, that's really music to my ears. It's where part of my passion lies, or a lot of my passion lies. And we also hear about data analytics governance. What is that difference between the data analytics governance and data governance?
Yeah, so I think it's something really important for me that, and I think it relates to what I said earlier with assets. Is that sometimes there is too much focus on only data, as a thing, and not on the
Yeah.
full value chain. So when we
Yeah.
talk about data analytics governance, it's really about looking at the whole value chain and everything that needs to be governed on that chain. So, for example, you have project governance, but also model and AI models, governance, which is really important because you have a lot of things attached to models which are not data governance in itself, in terms of risks or drifts or performance evolution and versioning management and so on. You have infrastructure governance to track to cloud cost, but also, for example, location. I've seen some awful things where the teams didn't take enough attention on where they were hosting the processes or the data related to the processes you're doing. You can have analytics governance managing, as I said before, the dashboards and reports, and again the life cycle and value and so on. But it could be also about your data pipelines, API governance, security governance. So I think what is important is that, and I make the link with what we call the X ops. There's a lot of ops like data ops, data gov ops, ML ops, AI ops, and so on. So
Mhm.
it's the same kind of extension of it. So at the end, I think it's really important to make sure that those programs, that those things, don't operate independently. You don't want to have all of those programs built as their own castles, and look at the whole value chain and make sure that again you you care about all those pieces of the governance from the high level, and make sure that how much data governance do I need versus how much machine models governance do I need, and so on. So making sure that you have that end-to-end view on what you actually need to govern to deliver things in a safe and efficient way.
Mhm. So you mentioned this a few times. Companies that are investing a lot in their data lakes and data pipelines and data architecture overall and machine learning and all these different models. And of course, even within data governance and specific programs like that. Well, how do you then measure and evaluate the value of all of these investments?
Yeah, I think we touched a bit on that on the question earlier. I think because at the end it's really about making sure you look back at your starting point,
Yeah.
and so because you've done a good job at the beginning to know how you're going to why you do things, because you know how you're going to measure that. You need to go back to that and communicate things in terms of expected versus realized value all the time. So I mean, three ways you could do it is one is it could be manually assessed for each initiative. I've seen that a lot, where you ask people to do some work to try to assess things and doing user interviews or doing some complex measurement and so on. It can be peer reviewed. You can go through approval workflow. So there's different ways to animate that process of everything. Sometimes it can be crowdsourced also with again like polls, but making sure that you ask your customers or you ask your partners or you ask your employees also things on and trying to get like like a poll with those people.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it can be automated. If you can track your performance metrics and you can track. What is difficult with that part is that sometimes it's very difficult to do a proper attribution. If, for example, if you have an initiative that's going to improve your sales, but your sales have a lot of different levers that will impact how much they go, and none of them are internal. Sometimes it's global changes and so on. So yeah, it requires some maturity to go there. I'm not saying you shouldn't, and sometimes you need to use proxies for that. So I think it's a variety of approach. And the last thing which is really important is that the best way to do that is to start doing it, and start doing it with pragmatic way. Uh, do some both qualitative and quantitative information, give visibility, communicate back on we are there and this is what it means to compared to where we started from. And that's kind of, we discussed about moving from a yearly strategic approach to a more continuous one. It's the same with value, moving to a more continuous way to be able to care about are things working well? Is my adoption correct? Are my metrics moving in the right direction? And so on. And then you're going to be able to mature on that and automate more and more. So it's like a new ops, for me, it's a value ops almost.
I like that. Ravindra is wondering if we can talk a little bit about how data quality aligns into a data strategy. And to me, Nicola, is, once you have those goals, you strategize how to achieve those goals, by being value driven, data driven. To me, data quality is that interim step. Well, if we're going to be value driven, data driven, we need to have good data quality in place. But it's not a goal per se. It's something that really needs to happen. It's implied that we need to have that.
Yeah, it's a mean, and I think that's something people fall a lot into. It's like a trap, they look at it as a goal and not as a mean. And what is interesting for me is that I've seen many cases where people were struggling with data quality, but there was not a one way to assess quality depending on how you're going to use the same data set. So sometimes there's a different version of the truth in terms of what quality means. And that's why it's always about if you have clarity on your strategy and clarity of the actual use case you want to achieve, then you can assess how much quality you need on your data, on what kind of quality you need. What does it mean quality for that data set regarding what you want to achieve with it? Because we know that sometimes it could be an endless quest, and sometimes you don't actually care so much, and sometimes you care a lot. So it's it's not so easy. So data quality is always important, but it has to be framed in that context of, because you can articulate the risks it implies for the feasibility or the decision you're going to make. Then you can have a good discussion on data quality and good investments.
I like that. Yeah, thank you, Nicola. What about culture? Does that, play a role in all of this, the organizational culture?
Yeah, obviously, because I talk a bit about it with the 3 U's at the beginning. Is at the end, the success is with adoption. If you don't, if it's not used, you will have zero value because it's like the failure. And adoption usually means change, and change means you're confronting the culture. And what people are talking about, data literacy and so on. So culture is key because that's how people will you will enable adoption at first, and then this is what will drive scale, because once you start having adoption, you have new practices and new needs for data, and a whole new world of capabilities will open. And that's something we'll talk a bit more in details in a future discussion, because it's a discussion that as itself,
Yeah.
because culture is about changing how people behave. I think that's really important for me. It's sometimes when we hear about data culture, people refer to data literacy and data literacy training and so on. And I don't disagree with that, but I still don't like it so much, maybe as an approach, because you can train people as much as you want. If you don't work on changing behavior, it's almost useless, because people,
Absolutely.
it's like pouring water on a duck. It's it won't make him wet. So that's really something important. Is, yeah, for me, culture is key, because this is what you need to work on for adoption. And to give a beginning of an answer, you have to work on bringing people on board with pragmatic things that will change a bit what they're doing, and they will see the value. And so you need to work with people on pragmatic stuff, and then train them, enlighten them, but it's really about getting people on board and working on the 3 U's that will be the first driver for the culture for me.
Absolutely. So I think we need to leave that for another episode on how to engage your organization in that data transformation journey, and we can talk all about it, and you can share your expertise and best practices and advice with us then.
All good.
All right. I also wanted to point people out to this maturity assessment that you have, and I'll post the link as well in the comments, on the data analytics value management maturity assessment, to kind of see where you are in that journey. All right. So you can take this free assessment and see where you stand.
Yeah, I think it's a good, again, it's a good start to also, find the right actions and enable a strategy once you know where you are. Happy to talk more about that also whenever you want.
All right. And I do encourage people to follow you, get in touch with you as well if they do have any questions. And of course, check out YOOI and book a demo.
Welcome. Happy to show a demo to anyone interested. And thanks, George, for the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and for all your insightful questions and comments.
Yeah, thanks for all the question. It's amazing. So thanks everyone. That was really a really great question. Tough question sometimes, but I like that. It's really awesome. So thanks everyone for joining and all the interactions, and awesome.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend ahead.